Welcome to Sustainable Success. I'm your host, Chris Salem, here with the Voice America Business Channel. Welcome if this is your first time here. You found us here on the Lisbon platform. And also, we do air on Spotify, Apple, and then also YouTube, but audio version. So again, any preference that you have, you could watch Sustainable Success each and every week on any of those different platforms, whatever suits you. And we always welcome a rating, in terms of the feedback, what you think, what can we do better? It's always welcome. And if there is any content that you'd like to see on a future show that we have not covered, which may be hard to believe since we've done almost 500 episodes over 8.5 years. Yes, we've been on the air 8.5 years. That we'd be more than happy to entertain and cover for a future show. So with that being said, if you'd like to reach out to our team, you can reach out to them here at Chris at Sustainable Success, like the name of the show, .net. That's Chris, CHRIS at sustainablesuccess.net. Today's show is being brought to you today by Alumni Direct. Alumni Direct is a social media community platform dedicated to bringing alumni together from all different generational types and an opportunity to meet new people for the first time. Now, it is a membership program taking out all the noise out of social media. You get to come in and generate genuine and authentic relationships with the people you choose to interact with. It also offers a wide array of different services for members not available to the general public, both on a personal and professional level. Feel free to reach out to them at alumnidirect.com. With that being said, we also want to mention to also our new listeners, we also have our Facebook page, forgot to mention. You can follow us there as well at Sustainable Success 2017. And of course, also there you can find all of our episodes over the years, where you can now search and find which types of content best resonate where you are, to listen to the subject matter expert that we had on to share that information that can help move you and your business to the next level. Well, we got a wonderful show for you planned today. We are going to be talking about people, purpose, and profit, the three pillars of sustainable remote intelligence. And we're going to be with somebody that I've gotten to know over the last month or so. His name is Luis Derechin. And a little bit about Luis: he is a serial entrepreneur and founder of Nir-Yu Smart Staffing, the company pioneering the remote, and that is all capitalized, by the way, remote intelligence staffing model. He'll be talking about that today. His entrepreneurial journey began at the age of 18, or if I'm reading right, leading to the creation of multiple successful ventures, including JackBe, the first Mexican tech startup to receive U.S. venture capital funding. And at JackBe, Luis and his brother Jacob developed innovative web technologies, including a precursor to Ajax, and became early leaders in nearshore outsourcing, building high-performing development teams in Mexico while serving clients from the Washington, D.C. area. Now, that company had a successful acquisition in 2013, and that's when he founded Nir-Yu to formalize and scale the sustainable staffing framework that he perfected, and he will be sharing here today. He's also an Amazon best-selling author on remote intelligence, which challenges traditional outsourcing models and sets a new standard for building purpose-driven, high-performing global teams. And you're going to get more information how to contact Luis here later in the show, so we encourage you to stay from start to finish. And without further ado, we welcome Luis Derechin to the show. Luis, how you doing today?
Chris, I am very well, thank you. It's an honor to be here. Very verbose introduction. As I'm sitting here at 57, you sometimes do your whole entrepreneurial career one day to another. But right now, when you were reading it, sort
Like
of
flashes before your
flashes,
eyes, right?
right? Starting my first company at 18, right? JackBe, all these things. I kid you not, these things flash in front of my eyes.
Go by
So
quick. I have the same feeling when when I have the reverse role when I'm the guest on a radio show podcast. Same thing. I'm going, wait a minute, did I do all that in that time? Wow, wow, wow. Where did the time go? But any event, we are,
followed
yeah,
by, man, I can't believe how old I am.
yeah, there you go. Yeah. But you and I can say age is a number, right? Because we're still out there. We're doing a lot of things that people that are like in their 30s and 40s are doing, and we're doing it well. So you and I had that chat earlier. So
Proudly, yes.
with that being said, let's kind of, talk about, the topic that you're gonna share with us today, here, about people, purpose, profit, and this, the remote intelligence platform, for sustainability for, businesses that are looking for, to optimize their teams, optimize the people they bring on board, and how to fulfill the purpose, and of course, how they're going to generate those KPIs, and which net profit is always one of the most important, if not the most important, in that frame. So talk a little bit of, I guess, about the backstory, if you like, to start off with, about what led up to remote intelligence and this framework you're going to share with us.
Sure. So, as you indicated in the intro, I founded, well, I found my first company at 18, but we'll sort of skip a
Sure.
many years, and we'll go to the early 2000s. The dot-com boom was amongst us, and I founded a technology company. I was living in Mexico at the time. I was born in Mexico, raised in the U.S., and then moved back chasing a girl who's not my wife. So God bless for the chase. Uh, but at the time, I was living in Mexico, and I founded a tech company that became the first Mexican startup to raise U.S. venture capital funding. The plan with my investors was move to the US, keep doing what you're doing. We've been successful in Latin America, so keep doing what you're doing. And you raise $3 million and you assume, especially in the early 2000s, that $3 million is going to go a very long way, especially when you live in Latin America and you see Latin American wages and cost of living. I moved to the Washington, D.C. area, and then reality hit, Chris.
Oh
And
yeah.
all of a sudden, six-figure wages, hiring a VP sales and hiring some senior tech talent. All of a sudden, I
It
was
ate,
looking.
ate that up quick.
Oh my God. I mean, I went from a runway that I measured in kilometers, right, to a
Yeah,
runway that seemed, that it was in feet, very few
yeah,
feet. So, um, we had to make a decision because as every
yeah,
entrepreneur listening to this understands, you need the right people in the right positions in order for you to be successful. You can't skimp on those. So, what are we going to do? If we
yeah.
hire everyone in the U.S., then all our funding is going to go away, and we have to take different measures. So what we end up doing, and this response to your question is we figured that we could hire a fair amount of the team in Latin America, keep them in Latin America in order to provide support, talent, collaboration. I won't even say support because they were key to the operation. So it was a hybrid team with some people, some key individuals in the US and some key individuals in Latin America, and a lot of support staff in Latin America. And by doing this, what we were able to do is lower our projected cost, make the runway longer. And it was because of that elongated runway that we were able to live or last long enough in order to find sort of, pivot once or twice and then find our next round of funding and then the next one. And on we went. 13 years later, we got acquired. So it was there that I realized if you can hire in Latin America, then God bless, right? Because it's lower cost and have people that are equally talented. You'd be competing in a smaller pond, but you're a bigger fish, right? In that small pond, so you could get talent that was probably biased in your favor, right? As a US company,
Yes.
you could go in and sort of throw around show your muscles, even though you're not much bigger in the US. In Latin America, you look bigger, you seem bigger, so you're able to hire better talent, you're able to pay them less, and you're able to go for it. And that's sort of where I won't say we discovered remote intelligence, but we discovered that having remote talent was key. I'll stop
Yes.
right there, and then we can get to remote intelligence in a sec.
Yeah. Yeah. I love what you just shared to kind of set the stage. I mean, so in this case, like you said, like, you can now secure talent and it doesn't matter where they are, as long, again, as long as that I mean, it depends on, the time zone. If they had to be on a similar time zone, or it wouldn't, if it didn't matter, then it wouldn't be an issue. But as long as it checked all the boxes of that role, So if you could talk about, what, with that, what you just shared, what that led to your next venture about, remote intelligence and how strategically helping other companies hire and secure better, people for those roles to meet their bottom line objectives.
Of course. So it was when we hired those individuals, we sort of, I'll say, accidentally fell into a framework that where we invested a lot into communication, we invested a lot into onboarding, we invested a lot into finding the right talent. And it was culturally acceptable. Again, my brother and I were working at this company. We had other executives. So we were a bicultural company, and because of that, we did great efforts. We went to great efforts in order to make sure that these people were well integrated. So this brings up the find the right people, right? Put them in the right position, make them imbibe them with that purpose, right? It's not just throwing them to the
Yeah.
to the wolves, so to speak, to the market. You have to invest the right amount of time and effort into onboarding, into integrating them into the company. So that's the purpose. And if you're able to take the right people with the right purpose and you're able to manage them correctly, then they'll probably get you to a bigger profit. For us, it was a longer runway because we were a startup. I can't, show off that we were profitable because we're not, but at least we create a longer runway, which is the same thing as having a profit. So to the first question, people, purpose, and profit, you combine those three P's in order to be successful. And then over 13 years, what we ended up doing is we went through uh, what's the word I'm thinking about? So a spiral where we would hire and integrate, hire and integrate,
Okay,
hire
got it,
and
got it.
integrate,
Yep.
right? And then by doing that, we created this framework, and we were able over time for the company to get acquired. Mind you, after the company is acquired, first thing that the acquirer does is, as founder and CEO, they gave me the boot, right? With a
Yep.
check, but that's fine. So I was living in Maryland at the time, and I went into quasi-retirement, thinking, I'm gonna take it easy for a while. And then I started getting some calls from some other CEOs in the region, Chris, and these friends, these peers would intimate that they had offshore projects or nearshore projects and that they weren't successful. They asked if I could go in and consult for them. So I did, and I started seeing things that I hadn't seen when we did it internally, right? They weren't following obviously the same processes. They weren't doing some of the what we consider basic blocking and tackling,
Yep.
and because of that, they were falling into disrepair and then failure.
Yeah.
And the more of these consulting gigs that I did, I started to find some patterns. And I found seven patterns that we call them the seven components of the death trap. Let me give you one statistic that I think even
Yeah,
before we
please
go
do.
into the seven components. So I started doing some research and found research from the Boston Consulting Group and from Deloitte and some others. And 73% of onshore or offshore projects fail. 73%. This
Wow,
is
that's a pretty significant number.
huge. People sit there and say, "Why am I failing?" Right? But the reality is that's the norm. That's three-quarters of most of these projects fail. So because of that, we tried to figure out what the patterns were, and then we came up with seven components of what we call the offshore team death trap, which is what happens when these companies start going on a death march, or these projects, not the companies themselves. Talent mirage, which is where skills you hire for skills that look solid on paper but crumble under real project pressure. Cultural chasm, where the people that you want to integrate into a project fail, right? And then that turns every interaction into a complex project.
Mm.
Hidden cost spiral, where unexpected costs and expenses eliminate the savings that you thought you were going to generate. Management quicksand, time sinks that turn you as the manager into a full-time babysitter. Retention revolving door, when all the others start hitting, then there's constant turnover that prevents you from ever building institutional knowledge. Communication fog, which is where, because you're crossing borders and cultures and time zones, then there are barriers that create delays. And then all of these things lead to quality erosion, which is what happens when the projects fail.
Oh, this is very interesting. I know we're going to be going to break here in about 2.5 minutes, and I want to get into some of those other 5 areas. But do you want to like just elaborate any more that you want to elaborate on what you just shared, like to kind of set us up for when we come back after the break?
Of course. So I think the message is no one goes into an offshore project thinking I'm going to fall into the death trap because you've done this before. Most of the individuals or executives, founders that start offshore or onshore projects, nearshore projects, have managed people before, have hired people before, have done these things, usually shoulder to shoulder in an office.
Yeah.
So then, how is it that they fall into the seven components? And the reality is you do it accidentally because you don't realize that doing it through an offshore project or a nearshore project, you have to be looking for these things and find a way to correct. So to your listeners, to the audience out there, I would say, look, hiring internationally in order to lower costs is a very important component. The world gets flatter minute by minute. So having the possibility of doing it is important. Having Slack, having Teams, having, Zoom, WhatsApp, all these things is important. But what's equally important is going into it eyes wide open and understanding that there are these pitfalls that you have to learn about them and figure out if you're falling into them. Because if you are, there are corrections. We'll get into it after the break, but there are ways to correct these things. And your audience should know that the fact that projects may fail 75 or 73% of the time is through no fault of their own. It's just because they haven't experienced these things before.
That's just it, like you said, because I usually, like you said, it's not like they're going into this and they've never managed people, on a type of project like this. It's just that again, it's the first time they're seeing it, and when you do, obviously you go through a learning curve that you're going to have to learn how to navigate it, and so on. Thank God that they're able to catch it earlier than later, so to speak.
Let's hope, yes.
Let's hope. Yeah, let's hope. Oh my God. Wow. Now this is great insights. I hope listeners, again, you're taking notes. Again, Luis is going to be sharing a lot more he's got 5 more things he's going to discuss with this, and we're going to get into some more things. So especially for those that have businesses where you have employees, or if you do have, or been thinking about looking at remote workers outside the country or wherever, this is where Luis is going to get into the meat and potatoes here in the second segment. We got to go to break, everybody, but when we come right back, we got more to come here in terms of people, purpose, and profit, the 3 pillars of sustainable remote intelligence. We'll be right back after the break. Welcome back to Sustainable Success. If you're just joining us, we're talking about people, purpose, and profit, the 3 pillars of sustainable remote intelligence. Again, if you are a business owner either looking to start a company, whether if you have an existing company and looking to grow your workforce, this is the show for you. A lot of great information. If you just tuned in, again, we encourage you to listen to segment one, and again, listen to the show in its entirety here later today or anytime thereafter. Just a lot of golden nuggets that our subject matter expert here, Luis Derechin, has been sharing. Luis, you have this acronym, the remote. So remote is an acronym, framework to to intelligence. So let's talk a little bit about what that acronym stands for, and if you could kind of tie that in to some typical challenges that people, like people that could benefit from this, that can be better by looking at this, and what are some of the typical results that could, be a byproduct of it.
Of course. So all of this is meant to be actionable. The well, let's go back to the seven components of the death trap, and I won't mention them
Yeah.
all again. But if the executives or founders that are starting to hire remotely or internationally, if they identify these seven components that we mentioned, then um, we need a framework in order to counteract that, right? So, geez, I've fallen into these, or I've identified that I'm committing these mistakes. What do I do to fix them? So, because of that, we created an acronym that counteracts all these. So, the R stands for rigorous talent selection, and we'll go into more detail in a second. But remote talent selection is there to counteract the talent mirage that we mentioned as one of the components. Expert onboarding and integration is there to counteract the cultural chasm. The M stands for manage support and services, which is there to ensure that the retention revolving door doesn't start and that management quicksand doesn't come about. You have optimized team performance. The T stands for transparent cost plus pricing. And the E, if you do the REMOT, if you hire the right people, if you onboard them correctly, if you provide the right level of support and services to your people, if you treat them with the right set of KPIs and tracking in order to optimize their team performance, and you're transparent about wages and make sure that people are making fair wage and whatnot, then what you'll get is enhanced scalability and growth. REMOTE, remote intelligence.
Wow. Love it. Love it. And if you want, like, can you discuss like some examples? You don't have to name any organizations, of course, anything specific, like where, like again, this really is applied well to help them, what in essence to what you had shared earlier about that percentage of 73%, like where they had some of these unforeseen issues that they didn't calculate or anticipate in this ventures.
Of course. So as you and I'll get into some examples, but what ends up happening, Chris, is that the seven components they appear sometimes individually, but more often they stack one on top of the other, right?
Ah,
And because they stack, so if you don't hire the right people because you sort of fell into the talent mirage, what ends up happening is you tend to have communication fog because you're communicating something that the person may not understand or doesn't have the right set of skill sets, and because of that, quality erosion. So giving you some examples, and I'll get to the more common ones. So imagine, if you will, companies in the US have hired in the US for whether it's weeks, months, or years, more likely not it's years. And now they want to start hiring internationally so that they can lower costs. Because why else would you hire remotely, right? If you could hire someone to work shoulder to shoulder with you, that is uh incredibly talented and at the right price point, of course we would all
yes.
prefer that, right? All of us prefer it. However, if you hire internationally, you tend to be you're able to hire three or four individuals for the price of one,
Price of one, and
right?
fulfill necessary roles and duties that are imperative to the success of what they're doing.
That's right. So
Yeah.
at the price of one, you could hire three or four individuals that, as you said, could do three, four different duties, tasks, and
Yeah.
in that sort of complete out your team. This is why a lot of international companies have been doing it for years, right? They've been offshoring manufacturing as well as services. But whenever someone that doesn't have all of the infrastructure that multinationals have, or all the expertise that multinationals have, you go at it. So you tend to hire wrong. The hiring internationally isn't quite the same as hiring in the US. In the US, you could take resumes and references to be exactly what they are. Sometimes in Latin America, you can't. You have to dive way in deeper. So whenever you're going to hire someone, right, in order to not fall into the talent mirage, you have to look, be mindful of the R in remote. So rigorous talent selection. If possible, hire through a network of individuals that you know that are going to recommend each other, right? Second, always try to hire people that currently have jobs instead of people that are, posting their resumes. Try to hire someone that currently has a job, because more likely not, people who currently have jobs are better. That doesn't mean all the time, but most of the time. Then whenever you see a resume, make sure that you understand what the individual that sent you the resume means by something. Test, verify, validate, right? You'll probably spend twice or three times as much time interviewing someone internationally than you would in the US. But you know what? If you're going to save, you know, a lot of money throughout the years, then
Yep.
the initial investment is well worth it. Then you have to check references. So doing all of these things is important, because if not, you end up hiring individuals that you thought knew, their stuff, or that had a certain
Yes. So
set of
there's a lot of
skill set.
assumptions and speculation.
You invest the time in integrating them and onboarding them. You start working with them, and then weeks or months later, you start scratching your head. This guy doesn't get it, or this gal doesn't get it. And over time, what we have found is that this is, again, one of the seven pitfalls, and it's one of the ones that is repeated more often than not, because they don't invest the time into being rigorous in the talent selection. If I could, I'll mention the second one that is also very prevalent, and it's in order for companies not to fall into the first component, they say, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to hire someone to help me do this. So they hire a company, a service provider, or they go into, Fiverr or one of these, and then they say, I'm going to have a middleman who knows their stuff, and by having them help me, then I'll do a better job. And the reality is, yes and no. They're going to have experience, but if you don't understand the right and the business model, and you don't align your success with their success, then what ends up happening is, some of these projects also start failing. Examples. So if all you do is pay someone to help you hire, then they get compensated for having a quick turnover and convincing you to hire quickly, right? Rather than hiring the right individual. So making sure that there's transparency in the deal is important. And then making sure that that's where the T in transparent comes in. The second part of transparency is, if you have a middle company or a middleman, they're they're incentivized into hiring quickly and then not telling you how much they're going to pay the individual doing the work. So they come back to you and they say, Chris, so good news. I found Maria, and Maria is the perfect person. You can interview her, you can validate her. And Maria only wants to get paid $22 per hour. And you're saying, they're saying, this is awesome, because I'd get charged $50, $60 for the same talent in the US. But you didn't ask, hey, how much are you going to pay Maria? You just assumed $22. I shouldn't ask. And over time, you realize, Maria's making $8. Of the 22, Maria was making 8, and the middleman was keeping 14 for overhead and
Yeah.
for their profit. Because again, their business model is trying to pay as least the lowest amount possible to the person doing the work and taking the most money from the
Mhm.
person paying to do the work. So Maria, after 6 months, comes to the customer and says, "Hey, I'm not quite getting paid what I think is fair. And because of that, I found another job, someone that'll pay me more." And you're sitting there scratching your head saying, "Hold it, but I'm paying
We're paying her
22.
$22 an hour.
I'm paying you 22." And she says, "No, no, you were paying me 8." It all went awry because of the lack of transparency
Transparency. Yeah.
from the get-go, right? So you need to have that. And then lastly, and well, not lastly, but another great example is we talk about expert onboarding and integration. So if you assume, right? So Chris, you're about as old as I am. So you
Yeah.
remember the movie The Bad News Bears?
Oh God, yeah.
All right, so my favorite scene from Bad News Bears is right at the beginning. The coach sits there and says,
Walter
"Assume."
Matthau.
Oh, no, 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 it's the coach that the kids had to have kicked
Oh,
out before
beforehand. Yes, beforehand.
right?
Before that.
So the
Yes.
original coach, the
Yes.
original coach goes in and says, "Assume, ASSUME," and then he says, "Whenever you assume, you make an ass," right? He shows the ASS out of you
And
and
me.
me, right? So then, that scene has always stuck with me. So you hire someone and then you assume, right, that the person knows, that the person just by doing is going to be able to onboard him or herself and is going to be able to fully integrate into the team. And the answer is no, that's not how it happens. You wouldn't do that if the person was in your office. You would dedicate the necessary time into making sure that the person understands the company's mission, the company's vision, that meets their coworkers, is able to spend some time with each coworker. What do you do, John? What do you do, Laura? Right? How can I help? What's expected of me? So it's all those onboarding and integration things that typically seem more accidental when people are present, right? Whenever you're working shoulder to shoulder, these things tend to just happen because they happen. But mind you, when individuals work remotely and everything has to be done through Meets, Skype, Teams, your platform of choice, then people get so busy that they're never scheduled the time to onboard and integrate. And because of that, weeks go by, and the individual that you've hired remotely says, "So I don't know what Laura does. I don't know what John does. How am I supposed to integrate and interact with these individuals?" Right? Your expectation is, "Come on, Maria, or come on, Esteban, right? You should know your stuff
Yeah.
by now." And accidental doesn't happen when people work remotely. You have to absolutely do things with purpose. You have to schedule the time to
I love
onboard,
that.
to integrate, to do all those things, which is why we call that expert onboarding and integration. Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense. And that leads me to a question, and I've seen this issue in the United States, from an HR perspective is, it's still like that, the old school model, like, hire someone based upon their education or even the talent, because talent, you can't undermine talent's great, but it'd be like if I just bring in a talent for the sake of talent and their head is only into getting their own recognition and stats, and they could care less about everybody else. They just want their numbers, and if they don't get it, or if they get it and it's now off to the next opportunity and they leave, then that wasn't the right hire. So how important is it with this looking at the skills? Like, so let's say somebody may not have the right education, but yet they have the skill set and they've demonstrated that, and it can be documented that could be transferable to this. Is that something that can be factored in? And that way, through a simulation exercise or a personality assessment, flush all that out. Could that maybe narrow it down that even on paper, it may not look like the right candidate, but actually, when they went through all this process and we checked all the boxes, they ended up being the best candidate?
Yes.
Yeah,
See, this is what rigorous talent selection means.
I
Rigorous
love it.
talent selection
Love it.
doesn't mean looking at a resume and assuming that you
Yeah.
understand it. Let me
That's what
let,
I
let me
when I
give
picked up when you said that. That's why I wanted to just make sure I heard it correctly.
you're absolutely right. Let me give you some cultural nuances. So, if we were to compare Indian
Yep.
people out of India with people out of the US and people out of Latin America, people in India, their resumes, they tend to be 5, 6, 10 pages long because they go into great detail about exactly what they did for whom, what the purpose
His
was, what
education is taken seriously in India, right? Yeah, and that's
right.
definitely yeah.
And their culture it is a very detail oriented culture, and because of that they do that. In the US you don't go into that much detail, but you go into what were mine what were my objectives and what were my main achievements. So it's very
Yeah.
high level, right? In the US,
Results based. Yeah.
results oriented, right? Because
Yeah.
that's US culture, right? What'd you do for me? So they go into results oriented. Latin America, it's very chatty, right? It's incredibly conversational, and because of that, resumes tend to be one page. And this isn't a person with a first job. One page could be a person that's done 20,
You
25
work in
jobs.
30 years.
Right. And because they're expecting for an interchange to
Change.
happen, right? The person doesn't want to culturally show off everything they know again, because that's not taken correctly here. They would rather be humble and just say, I worked here. And then we start chatting, and that's where I'm going to tell you about some of the stuff you said. So look, yes, I didn't go to a top college, but I got a job in X place, and I was able to, through my own means, I was able to do X, Y, and Z, right? And achieve, right? So they'll give you the detail, they'll give you the results similar to US and India, as long as you converse with them. And if you don't do it, then you're never going to find it out, which is sort of what you're talking about, right? And because of that, you have to be culturally adept at how to do these.
Well, yeah, no, you made a great point because there's so many factors, and and we could talk about it when we come back after the break because we have a break here in about a minute and a half. But what you just described there, the U.S. is very results oriented, so you get like that could be like if we're using a personality assessment, it might be there's more D's, right? More D's or people that want results. It could be I's too, but except they're slightly different in how they approach it. And then like a lot more C's, conscientious in India because they like detail. And then in Latin America, because they're conversational, you're going to get more people centric types where it's about the conversation, it's about relationships, it's not about the transaction itself. So,
Correct.
and we got to layer, and then there's generational types, and then you said culture and ethnic types because Latin America is conversational. It's you come in there and you just start, just throwing a piece of paper with and talking about what you've done, and most people probably won't even look at that, but if you have the conversation and and you can articulate that well and share in a conversation, a two-way conversation, it's going to go a lot further than the other way around. So that's what I picked up and why, and I love to dive in a little more into that after the break here.
Of course. No, I think you said it correctly. It's
Yeah,
both cultural and generational. Yes.
yeah, yeah. Because I mean, the older generations are going to be a different, than the younger generations and how they, especially how they communicate and process information for sure.
Yes.
Wow. Well, I know you're gonna cover a lot more ground with us. We got more to come here. We got to go to break, everybody. But when we come right back, we're gonna kind of tie everything together. There is just some golden information Luis has shared here. We highly encourage everyone again to listen to the show in its entirety here later today. We'll be right back, and we got more to come with people, purpose, and profit, the three pillars of sustainable remote intelligence. We'll be right back after the break. Welcome back to Sustainable Success. We're talking about people, purpose, and profit. Three pillars of sustainable remote intelligence. We're here with our subject matter expert, Derechin. Again, he is the founder of the Remote Intelligence Framework with his organization that is Nir-Yu Smart Staffing. And today's show is being brought to you today again by Alumni Direct. Alumni Direct is a social media community platform dedicated to bringing alumni together from all different generational types and an opportunity to meet new people for the first time. It does now have a special section for athletes. These are professional athletes that are retired, now transitioning to everyday life. Well, guess what? You don't have to do it alone. You get to form groups where now you can align with other professional athletes looking to transition into, say, a new career. Maybe go to work for someone, buy a franchise, buy a business, and you don't have to do it alone. You have support, and this is an opportunity now where you can do this through Alumni Direct. Alumni Direct also has a podcast aligned with this called From Athletes to Entrepreneur. Airs every week through the co-founder and CEO, Rob Finkelstein. So again, if you like some more information about that, if you're a professional athlete and more information about the podcast, check him out at alumnidirect.com. That's alumnidirect.com. Lewis, just really great information. Just a lot of golden information on terms of the process that you discussed with this. I think is highly valuable for business owners, anybody responsible for staffing remotely or even internally as well. Just such great information. Can you go into we left off after the break about like looking at how different cultures might go about how they go about handling things. If we could go a little bit more into that on the skills and how different talent, if we're where we're sourcing, how we could go about best getting that information to see there's alignment. Like again, if it's certain cultures, certain generational types, and any other, difference in personalities.
So let's go back to the title of today's podcast, and we're mentioning people, purpose, and profit. So
Correct.
the and I'll add one more word to this. So there's the intentionality of
Yeah.
people, purpose, and profit. So you hire someone remotely because you're intentional about lowering costs or getting people at a potentially lower cost or being able to get more people at the same cost to do more, right? And then be able to get more profit. You have to be intentional about the way you source individuals, which gets at the question you were saying. So different things mean different things to different cultures, different generations. And your interviewing process, the getting to know process in the US, it's funny. So first time I moved to US, I went to interview a candidate, Chris, and it turns out that the candidate was interviewing me. And I sat there and said, hold it. He's looking for a job. It's me that should be asking the questions, but you know, here was a
He's
talent.
interviewing you. He's like, yeah, he's doing his due diligence. Like, yeah, that's I would not you would not anticipate that, right?
I've never experienced that outside of the US. Now,
Yeah.
maybe Europe is the same, but in the US, individuals go into a job opportunity thinking, sell me on why I should work for you, right? And me as someone whose entire career had been spent in Latin America, I'm sitting there saying, hold it, I'm about to pay you. I'm the one asking the questions. Why should I, why is it that I should convince you? So that's a cultural nuance that it's almost flipped on its head. I've seen it when executives go into interviews expecting, right? So what other questions do you have for me? They ask the candidate, and the candidate says, no, I really don't have any questions for you because it's culturally not accepted for the candidate to be interviewing the executive, right? But then the US executive then comes back and says, "Yeah, I decided not to hire the person because the person didn't know or wasn't curious enough or
Because we assumed that they should have done the same thing as the American counterpart. Yeah.
Correct. So again, it's assumed or accidental, right? We expected for things to be the same in the US as here. We didn't have the right, the right culture nuance. It does the same thing for the types of skills. People in the US results oriented. So you'll say, okay, so Chris, I see that you worked at Amazon and you were a project manager. Tell me. And then so Chris will thump his chest and say, oh yeah, during my time, and he'll tell you all about those. Whereas typically the person in other countries, and let me sort of normalize on Latin America, because that's my area of more expertise. They humility tends to be a trait that is more positively portrayed than assertiveness, and because of that, usually it's US interviewers that need to sort of coax things out of them. Okay, so while you were there, tell me exactly what you did. And when you did that, what is it that you achieved? And what were the goals? And so it's very different interviewing for one than the other. And I mean, I could go on for ages, Chris, but these are the types of things that you have to, by being aware and by understanding that, you have to be rigorous and intentional about how you hire people, how you treat people, how you manage people, what purpose you give them if you want the intentionality of that profit to show up.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. So true. And so what would be some recommendations when you work with like to help them? Because maybe here it's a lack, it's just a lack of awareness, right? They just again, that's why unfortunately why people assume and speculate, because they see things from what they think it should be or what they know versus adapting to what is.
That's absolutely right. And because of that, I wrote a book. Now, I know your audience is going to sit there and say, "Sure, he wants to sell us a book." The book is
No.
99 cents. So I'm not going to make any money.
But
All right?
share anything you like from that book, and we will make sure that if you people will, for $1.99, they will get that book.
Exactly. So what I did is when I realized all of these things that we've been chatting for the last 30 some minutes, the seven components of the death trap, the remote intelligence framework, how you identify if you've fallen on one of these components. If you've fallen, how do you implement one of the letters in the acronym or the framework in order to sort of pick yourself out of the death trap that you are. So understanding that only 27% of projects are successful, we created a book. It's somewhat easy read, 220 pages, 99 cents again. What I would recommend is
That's
first
a
of all,
bargain for 220 pages for 99 cents. That's a
well,
bargain.
true, but the digital version is
Well,
99
yeah, yeah,
cents.
I get it. I get it.
The physical, I think it's 17.99, which barely
Okay,
covers
that
half.
makes sense. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
But so read the book, and then we have a website. It's called the book is Offshore Team Death Trap, and then there's a subtitle, but it's on Amazon, and it was a bestseller in the offshore category for a few weeks back when we launched a few months back. So read it, and in order to get a sense of all of these things that you and I have been conversing, in order, to go knee deep into how can you identify them, how can you solve them. If you still need help or if you want more help, we also put up a website, the offshoreteamdeathtrap.com, and in there are PDFs that sort of walk you through how do I identify the components, how do I plan for a project that I'm going to be doing offshore, some of these, how do I interview remotely. So all of those things in order for people to do it themselves and be successful. And let me just show off, right? I'm going to not be as Latin American and not be as humble, but show off that by doing these things, Chris, we've been able to increase our success rates to 95%. So going from 27% to 95% by following a framework and all these on all the advice we provide, anyone would be crazy not to invest the time and the small amount of money in order to do that.
Absolutely. And we highly encourage everybody, find the book, get the 99-cent version. If you like a hard copy, hey, 18 bucks. So it's worth it. It's packed with a lot of this information. And again, you can't afford not to get this information. It is, you don't want to make, again, I've seen a lot of organizations go through a turnstile of people, and that's just costing you more time and even more money with a lot of the stuff that Luis has shared here today that can help offset those costs in onboarding and securing, the right fit, so to speak, for that role, especially offshore or outside of where you are.
Absolutely. And if I could, I'll also sort of advertise the service that we provide. And
Yeah,
it's
please do.
for those who have either done it themselves and don't want to do it themselves, or for those first timers that want to do it. We don't provide consulting as much as we provide a service to basically do it with you. It's not done for you, it's done with you. And what
With
this
you.
means is we'll go through the process of finding the right individuals, vetting them, interviewing them, make sure that your interviews, in order for you to confirm everything that we vetted, again, being intentional in the rigorous talent selection. So we will run a process. We will then help you create an onboarding and integration process and then run that process. We will help you by being your partner in order to manage the support and the services that you provide to your offshore team. We will help you optimize team performance. Our pricing, we're transparent about it. We'll let you know here's how much the person wants to make. And we provide cost plus pricing. And because it's cost plus, you know exactly what you're paying, what everything costs, and we'll agree not to a percentage of the person's wages, but a flat fee so that you pay us on a monthly basis for us to, whenever you're successful, we're successful. And then if you do all these things, you will get enhanced scalability and growth. My company's called Nir-Yu, Nir-Yu. Phonetically, it's Nir-Yu at niryu.com. And we'll happily talk to anyone who needs help or wants help in order for them to do this.
Love the transparency there, Luis. And you mentioned that earlier, why that is so important because, like in this case, you're an employer and you find out you're paying $22 an hour. And meanwhile, that person who's now leaving, you're like, why are they leaving? And because they got something better. Well, I don't, and you find out they're only making $8 versus the 22. Yeah, that could be quite frustrating.
Yeah, yeah, much, very
Wow.
frustrating. Yeah,
Well, what I
agreed.
want before we conclude, first of all, I want to thank you, taking time out of your busy day to be with us here. This has just been a wealth of knowledge. I'm going to encourage again all the listeners to go back and listen to the show in its entirety here again today. I want to thank you personally, rest of the team here at Sustainable Success. And I want to leave this next minute or so, or a minute and a half, just so people now get to connect with you personally. Like, how could that be on LinkedIn, email, to support everything you talked about, what your organization's doing to help and assist decision makers in this process.
Of course. So first of all, thank you, Chris, again, and thank you to your audience. Look, the fact that your podcast is called Sustainable Success, that's what you want, you're helping people do, right? It's be successful and then sustain it. We're aligned. It's the same thing we're looking to do, with the difference that we specialize in offshore talent or nearshore talent selection, hiring, and support, right? In every way you can imagine. The way you find us, so the best place to find me is LinkedIn. I'm big on LinkedIn. I'm always putting out content. It's Luis, or Luis, Luis, spelled the Latin American way. My last name, Derechin, Derechin. So look for me on LinkedIn. LD at niryu.com is my email. Feel free to email me. Happily to interact if anyone needs any sort of help. We don't charge anything for consultations or providing help or providing advice. This is about, to your podcast title, it's about helping them be successful and sustain that success through remote intelligence.
Wow. Excellent. Great information. And Louis, before we conclude, just any final word or statement you'd like to leave with the audience, just to tie it all together here, 15, 20 seconds.
Sure. Best way to win the war for talent is to not fight it. Hire offshore, hire nearshore. There's a lot of talent there for the taking, lower prices, and you're able to thump your chest a lot more. So do it. Do it now, but do it with remote intelligence.
That's a great way to thump your chest. I mean, and I think we all need more of that, in the business world that we're in today. Again, everybody, I hope you got received a lot of value. I know I did. This was a great show here with Luis. Again, we encourage everyone to reach out and get to know him and his company, Nir-Yu Staffing. Again, reach out, connect on LinkedIn, and make sure to get your hands on the book, either the digital version and or the soft copy if you prefer to have something in your hands. We want to thank you, listeners, joining us each and every week here at Sustainable Success. Again, we are committed to your excellence, both on a personal and a business level. And feel free to reach out to us anytime if there's any content you'd like to see here on a future show. We want to wish everybody a great rest of your week. We'll be back next week, same time. And we will be concluding, that will be our last show for the year, since we'll be taking off for Christmas and New Year's, and we'll be back fresh, ready to go the following Thursday after New Year's. Till then, everybody have a great holiday, and we'll see you next Thursday. Take care.